Hey everybody, it's me, Remy, the comic book poser, and today it's time for part 2 in my new Thursday series of indie comics you should invest in. Again, nothing to do with spec books. It's all about stories that I think are being told really, really well from publishers that everybody may not get books from. The subject of today's indie titles you should invest in is Finger Guns from Vault Comics. Finger Guns is written by Justin Richards with art by Val Halverson, colors by Rebecca Nulty, and letters by Taylor Esposito. I think this comic has impacted me in ways that I didn't feel it would. That from a read that started out fairly lighthearted in the first book has kind of turned into a dark comedy or a black comedy in so many different ways, that looks at how kids from two very different definitions of a broken home may attempt to cope with their predicaments. It looks at two kids that have very odd powers, superpowers, that they don't know how or why they've received them, and they don't necessarily know how they could potentially expand the scope of their power. But this kind of coming of age like power story, coupled with understanding how to survive a potentially broken home, is something that, I think Justin Richards does a remarkable job of doing across the first 3 issues which have been published. And then, dear God, when issue 4 hits the newsstands, hits your LCS, hits however you read your books, goddamn. I read number 4 and my jaw was just hanging, and I stared at my computer, started writing something, stared back at my computer again, went back 4 pages and was just in shock and had to kind of process the new turn that it had taken. So this again is one of those videos where you'll see me for a little bit, then we'll cut into some motion shots of panes from the first 4 issues, and then we'll kind of talk about what really excites me about this book at the end. So it's time to check out The World of Finger Guns. This is from Vault Comics, written by Justin Richards, with art by Val Halverson, Rebecca Nulty, and letters by Taylor Esposito. In this first couple of panels, you get some idea of who Wes, the boy in the red jacket, is. Wes is kind of this lonery kid that doesn't fit in with anybody, and the young woman in the purple, who we don't know her name yet, but she and Wes constantly bump into one another, is Sadie. When Wes figures out that his dad is not at home yet again, he goes to the local mall for dinner, and when he sees his father and son fighting, he fires off the finger guns, and you learn that Wes has the power, when he shoots with, 2 fingers and his thumb, that he can instantly make anybody outraged. And he wasn't sure after the first time whether or not it happened, so you see some experimentation with some other folks. And when he gets into an altercation in the parking lot, lo and behold, someone shows up to kind of save his butt, and it's Sadie, who when she shoots with 1 finger, she has the ability to calm people down. One of the running gags throughout the 3 books is the 2 kids kind of experimenting on one another in terms of learning if they have both the power to anger and calm down, but also kind of experimenting with the effects because they know that one person's power will cancel out the other one's. Issue 2 has a beautiful variant cover. All of the variants that are done by Jen Hickman are amazing, but the story in book number 2 is really kind of trying to focus on where their power comes from or what they can do. This is also where we get the first appearance of Mr. County, who is a guidance counselor, and he has a more significant role in each book, but here's where we learn that Sadie has an abusive father at home, primarily in the direction of her mother, but also her. Here's where you see them kind of looking into sign language to see if it's the key to their powers, and then at the bottom of the panel, you see Sadie's 3 friends kind of going, no, we don't like this. Here's where you see them experimenting with ASL, and they discover that ultimately all of those different hand formations they can't fight, so they decide to go back and hang out at Wes's home. And you learn that Wes is dealing with a single parent and his father because his mom recently died, and, you know, he's got some of his mother's things, especially her records, that he's afraid to kind of open into or go through because it's clear he's not 100% done with the mourning process. Again, here's another beautiful Hickman variant to issue number 3. And in issue number 3, things to start to get a lot more intense. We see not just Sadie and Wes's relationship becoming closer and more significant, but we start seeing the guidance counselor pop up a little bit more frequently. And then we see that Sadie's, crew of friends are getting angrier that she's not hanging out with them, that she's focusing on Wes. In this book, we see them attempt to experiment on one another again, and Sadie has learned that if she holds her finger gun a little bit differently, it changes the way she feels about things. And then here we get to see a little bit more opening up in terms of Wes dealing with the loss of his mother that was alluded to in the previous book, and here's where Sadie opens up a little bit more. This might be my favorite panel from all of the first 3 issues together, where you see them kind of experimenting on the dog, and his eyes turn purple and he becomes fearless. So here's where Sadie asks Wes if he can experiment on her again, and the moment he fires the shot, she says she doesn't think she feels anything, but all of a sudden she becomes a lot of carefree, a lot of free, a lot of fearless. And there are moments where she wants to, start getting Wes out of his shell and dance. And it makes you wonder if these are emotions that she has for Wes that are kind of held back by how kind of grounded and behind a shroud of mystery she is. Then she decides to ride the bus home, and she wants to use that same fearlessness to potentially confront her father. And here's where you kind of see her shoot up. And what I'm not revealing from the end of issue 3 is kind of what happens once she gets into the house, but it's fairly shocking. From issue number 4, I had a couple of panels that I wanted to preview from early in the book that don't spoil really anything for the rest of the story arc. But you see, in the world of Sadie and Wes getting back together after Sadie goes home, she's very withdrawn and recluse. She's not talking to her friends. Her friends don't think that she will talk to Wes. And then, of course, out of nowhere, I think that's the guidance counselor again, or it's just a teacher saying, sit down. They are at an aquarium for a class trip. I think the art in these several panels are kind of cool, and we get hooked back up with one of the tropes earlier in the series where they're kind of aloof and oblivious to the world around them, and they bounce into one another, and Wes and Sadie decide that they should have a conversation about what had happened the night before. Alright, so if you haven't been reading Finger Guns, I hope you kind of enjoyed the little bit of a breakdown that I gave you across the first 3 issues, and then a little taste of issue 4. This story, like I said in the introduction, it has done a lot to kind of make me think, about emotions regarding a bunch of different situations. Thinking about the way that, the kids can, rock their finger guns to either their success, to their detriment, or as a method of escapism. What is missing from some of these still shots are big things that may spoil parts of the story. So there are still reasons why you should read 1 through 3 on your own before issue 4 comes out in a couple of weeks. Because like I said, I think the events in issue number 4 is something that people will be talking about for a while, and I know that I'll be one person continuing to scream the gospel of finger guns, not only on my YouTube channel, but on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, because I think this is, in terms of me thinking about books that will have had the biggest impact to me across 2020, this is definitely in the running for one of the books that I have loved the most, and we're only 4 issues in. So you should send a message to your LCS, you should find previews codes for issues 4 and on, but find a way to pick up Finger Guns 1 through 3, and then make sure you've done enough work to see if I'm pretty sure we're past the pre-order date for issue 4, but to see if your LCS can kind of secure some before the next book comes in, or reach out to me. I know that my shop has ordered a couple of copies. I don't know how many people there are reading it, so if I need to go in, swoop up several copies of Finger Guns number 4 and then send them out to the people, just let me know in the comments, send me a message on Twitter, Instagram. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you see now why this is one of those stories that I feel speaks volumes to me, and I, hope you check it out, and I hope you get on your social media and tag, any member of the creative team in a tweet, an Instagram post, any of those things, and let them know how you feel about the story. Unless you're like, I think this sucks, then you're right. Or it might just not be for you. I know we all read and relate to things in a different way, but this to me just feels like one of those stories that has a cross-cutting impact in terms of the number of people who should be able to relate to this story. So as always, thanks for stopping by. I hope this is an indie comic you decide to invest in, and as always, have a good one.